Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. This is the FINEX webinar on managing HR during and after the lockdown, the legal limitations. Please join me in prayer as we acknowledge the presence of the Lord. Father, I thank you that your mercies are new every morning and your faithfulness is great. Empower me to sing the song of your great love, even when I must sing it through my tears. Make us sensitive to your guidance, Lord. May this experience teach us to be humble. We ask and pray in Jesus' name, amen. Please join me in the national anthem. Thank you, dear friends. May I now call on our President, Jeng Pascual, for the opening remarks. Jeng?
Thank you very much, Ned. Welcome and good morning to all of you on this call, on this webinar. This is the second part of the webinar series sponsored by our FINEX Professional Development Committee in cooperation and collaboration with our FINEX Academy. Maybe for those who are not aware, the FINEX Academy was incorporated back in 2018 to serve as the Center for Research and Education to professionalize financial management and practice. And it is our ultimate aspiration to be the training ground for high caliber financial executives and future CFOs. Now going to the webinar at hand, we are, companies and businesses are facing a world-class dilemma. How to respond to the current crisis, remain resilient with the continuing operational and financial challenges, and eventually to set themselves up for future recovery. So 3 R's, response, resilience, and recovery. As financial executives and CFOs, we are not limited to the financial aspects of the dilemma that we're facing. We also need to understand and consider what is happening in our company's operations and educate and influence our business colleagues on the impact of their actions on our financial results and cash flows. Last week, our speakers for the first part of this webinar series talked about how to manage liquidity. Today, we have invited distinguished speakers to share their thoughts on a key element of surviving this crisis, our people. A number of HR issues arose since the start of the ECQ, how we will help our people weather the crisis, how we will continue to pay them, and how we can ensure our people are ready when we restart our operations. So again, response, resilience, and recovery. Our distinguished speakers for today include a seasoned HR practitioner who's one of the leaders in the PMAP, and an experienced labor lawyer who can tell us about the intricacies of how to manage the situation we are in as it relates to employees. So with that, I'd like to encourage you to ask your questions so that we make full use of the time we have this morning to educate ourselves on how to respond to this crisis on the HR front. And I wish you a pleasant good morning. Back to you,
Thank
Ned.
you, Jeng. Thank you, Jeng. Before I introduce, thank you, Jeng. Before I introduce our speakers, let me advise everyone that if you have questions for the speakers, you may use the chat or the Q&A buttons on your screen. I will read them during the open forum. Our first speaker is Reynaldo Gener. Rene is the Executive Director of the People Management Association of the Philippines since 2013. Concurrently, he's a Director of the Asia Pacific Federation of Human Resource Management and Government Academe Industry Network. Rene is a distinguished HR practitioner with over 30 years of work experience from Honda Philippines and San Miguel Corporation, including its subsidiaries. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Commerce, major in Management from the Colegio de San Juan de Letran, and a Bachelor of Laws from the University of Santo Tomas. He's a candidate of Masters in Industrial Relations at the University of the Philippines Asian Labor Education Center. Our second speaker is Attorney Robel Lomibao. Robel is a partner at Picazo, Buyco, Fider, and Santos, and is a member of the Labor, Litigation, and Arbitration Department of Picazo Law. He joined Picazo Law in 2004. He was admitted to the bar in 2005, and he has a bachelor's degree in a BA, Political Science, and a Bachelor of Laws from the University of the Philippines. We will now hear from our first speaker, Mr. Rene Gener. Rene?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for inviting us in this webinar. And thank you too for strengthening the collaboration between FINEX and PMAP. May I have the next chart, please? I have the next chart, please. May I have the next chart of my presentation, please? The next chart, please. Okay. Given today's conditions, as we have been on ECQ for 35 days, it is fitting that we take a short look on its effect to both employers and employees. The first effect is business disruptions. Most of businesses were faced with challenging conditions that were unknown or unheard of for a long time. Industries are in the verge of collapse, while others are barely surviving. The other effect is employers are trying to normalize the abnormal. Like true warriors, many businesses stood up and faced the challenges with whatever means they can do to sustain the business. Essential workers were allowed to report with added protections and incentives. Non-essentials were working from home. For some, this meant business as usual. The next chart, please. Okay. Major reactions of most businesses was to work from home. But there are certain challenges to this. Number one is, do we have the proper facilities, such as availability of computers or laptops for employees and internet connectivity? The second concern is performance and productivity measures and how to keep your employees motivated or physically detached from us. How do you measure this for your employees? For us, we prepared based on our strategic deliverables for this year. A weekly set of performance deliverables for all of our staff, and these are reported back to us at the end of the week. A simple case of performance measure. On motivation, we personally discuss with all of the staff the assurance that we can extend to them, what we can extend to them, so as to take out their fears and apprehensions. So there is continuous motivation. Main message is we are adjusting to everything to ensure continuity of work or security of tenure. The next one is on data privacy protection. This is very critical because your people working from home should be aware of what to share and how to ensure that these are not violated. We did still implement that before any critical data is sent out, our data privacy officer is our clearinghouse. There is a need also to retool employees and reallocate work. Some of our employees' work is not in sync with work from home, like our liaison officers, our assistant for chapters, which entail a lot of travel. Work from home will not fit with them. So what we did was we gave them additional training so they can do other work, and we unloaded some of the work of our staff and gave it to them. This way, they will be beneficial to the organization. The next chart, please. I'd like to share with you now a result of a PMAP survey we did 2 weeks after the ECQ. First, most of our company members assured pay and benefits for their employees, meaning even they are not working or working from home, they are guaranteed with their pay and benefits during the period of the ECQ. For others who could not really afford it, the leaves utilization were extended. Others gave cash advances provisions, and others advanced the 13th month pay, but mostly enhanced health care provided for testing and online consultation. And other amenities such as manufacturing wherein they extended board and lodging so that production can continue. The next chart, please. The next chart, yeah. The next question now is, since we are all detached, how do we engage employees? Work from home arrangements looks okay at the start, but might lose its appeal over time, leading to disengaged employees, and productivity and performance can suffer. How do we prevent this? The first is, let us continue communicating. Work from home can make employees feel like they are working alone, kind of being left out of circulation. What we do is we conduct a regular once-a-week meeting, checking on their personal health status, that of their family members, and soliciting personal issues that can be of help, kumustahan and kwentuhan. Then we discuss or talk about their work and workload. And we keep on reminding them that all of us are in the same boat. Number two, we set clear expectations. Ensure that you communicate your expectations while working from home. Employees who are aware of what your expectations are will be more motivated to meet them. If you want employees to be online on specific hours or of the day or week, it should be communicated. Communicate too the reports that they must submit to you and when to submit. Work from home requires a lot of understanding and patience from managers. Remember that they are at home and are still managing their children, wives, husbands, and doing some household chores. This is the time not to be conscious about reporting hours, but let us focus on results. The third one is recognizing good work. This is a key factor in boosting engagement among telecommuting employees. Thank everyone and let team members recognize the extra efforts they are extending and given recognition to some excellent performance. In addition, managers should send out a congratulatory note to each of his team members. Like most of our board of trustees now, they really are busy in texting and sending emails of motivation to our staff. This can go a long way for employees to feel valued and engaged. Encourage work-life balance. There is no physical separation between workspace and their personal space. Be specific with them and make them feel that they are not, again, they are not going to be work from home on a 24/7 basis, as this can eliminate stress and burnout. Communicate to employees the importance of creating boundaries. Example, suggest that they work normal hours and they step out away from their laptops during break time and at the end of the day. Come back until the next day. Important to develop also a business etiquette. Managers should provide business etiquette. Like, for example, one guideline that I have is we call each other, communicate each other maximum up to 9 p.m. Start at 9 a.m. We do not call beyond 9, communicate beyond 9 p.m. unless the house is on fire. And then the last one is demonstrate a collaborative culture. Employees tend to be engaged and motivated when they feel that they are part of your team. Managers must communicate to them even though they are far apart. You are working towards the same business goal. The next chart, please. In spite of economic downturns, many businesses try to normalize their operations to help secure their employees' security of tenure. They find ways that may result in having the business afloat. One of the biggest approaches is to look at retrenchment options. Retrenchment is defined as the reduction of costs or spending in responses to economic difficulty. I'd like to emphasize the words economic difficulty, such as the conditions that we are in today. The next chart, please. Here I have defined quickly on what are the retrenchment process. What we normally do is we define business situations and directions. This is what we call the strategic plan. We define likewise what can we see as far as technology, market, finance, and structures are concerned in the next 3 years. This is strategic planning that shows where the company is heading and how. Competency and work implication. Based on that, we forecast what are the competencies that the organization will require and what are its implications on our workforce. Rationalizing an inventory of work plan. This is determining what are your labor inventory, current and forecasted. We normally do it by department, position, and the total company inventory. Matching of positions and persons on competencies. This will determine if you have the available projected competencies in your organization or whether you need to recruit them. Next chart, please. There is also a need to define the current separation packages available to your employees, monetary and benefits, for comparison or basis of retrenchment or restructuring packages. We must first exhaust transfer and internal placements prior to going on retrenchment. Analysis and design of retrenchment package. Based on your financial conditions, we now analyze and define what can we offer as retrenchment package to those that will be affected. And this is not only focused on the financial aspect, but we also give support benefits, such as can we help them find new jobs? Can we assist them in training so that they will gain new skills and competencies? And of course, support. There is a need also to determine if you can extend HMO plans, because these are one of the needs of our employees. The next one is we have to design a communication plan. What are the key messages that we would like to communicate? Like, for example, one is business viability. Where are we in the industry plus competitiveness? Why are we going into retrenchment must be very, very clear for our organization. Then we should have specific messages to our audience. And then, of course, after all you have done the first 9, while doing it, it must be done with legal protection. Get involved with your in-house counsel, external counsel, and of course, consultative meeting with your union counsel and the Department of Labor and Employment. Next chart, please. Involvement. Management team's involvement is very imperative. From the CEO down to the supervisor. We only communicate one message para hindi nagki-criss-cross ang ating information. And of course, the design of your timetable. The last reminder is, when doing retrenchment, let us try to balance business needs and people's needs. Next chart, please. Now, let's assume that ECQ is over. What are the projected new normals that we can expect? When we return to work, it is not simply like switching on the light and welcome employees back to the workplace. There will be a whole new workplace initially and might be adapted for a lengthy period of time. Work from home will be a new normal, but we have to address issues and concerns that we have discussed earlier. Flexible work arrangements. There might be a greater demand from employees for flexible hours, remote work arrangement, because they have already experienced that arrangements now, and they have a very solid argument about it. Plus the demand for more paid sick leave due to the risk and exposure which is outside the normal. Flexible work arrangement will likewise drive higher performance and productivity, as employees will have the flexibility to adjust to situations. It will also help employers cut costs, as they won't need the same workspace as they have today. The flexible work arrangement will minimize the risk of employees on commuting. Along with this is the need to review people benefits to suit the need of the time. We will be entering into a completely different workplace with the corresponding new set of rules or policies. Prioritize health and safety. Most employers may see it fit to slowly restart and ask employees to report in phases or on a staggered basis. And employers might put in a new set of face masks, workspace distancing, hand washing stations, more PPEs, and frequent wellness checks. Expect frequent disruptions too. In the absence of a surefire cure or vaccine, we can expect a slack in affected employees and lead to continuity of work, but we can likewise expect a spike in affected employees and disrupt business again. We should prepare for this until we get a surefire vaccine. Workers will report in phases. Most employers may see it fit to slowly restart and ask employees to report in phases or staggered basis. Let us focus first on the essentials that need to be at the workplace. That really, the term essential varies per industry depending on your need. The next chart, please. Okay. Still on, I've discussed that. Next chart, please. Okay. Rearrangement or layout of workspaces. As discussed earlier, this could be a necessity. I envision workplaces with individual glass panel cubicles and different work locations and hours of work. It also would lead into changes in pay practice. The demand for hazard or at-risk pay will rise. The work from home will still work with work-life balance. Therefore, might lead to demands of more paid leaves. Pay might even be adjusted. It could be that we are going to pay our employees in terms of hourly rates rather than on a daily or monthly rate basis. This could be a potential demand from the employers. Enhance safe workplaces policies. In addition to what has been discussed above, workplaces need to be sanitized and disinfected frequently and regularly. Likewise, in meal areas or your cafeteria. On-site health screening will be a new normal, and we will do it very frequently. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to collaborate with FINEX. We will likewise be open to questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rene. That was very comprehensive. May I now call on our next speaker, Attorney Robel Lomibao. Robel?
Good morning, Mr. Cuseco, and good morning, everyone. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to join this webinar as one of the resource speakers. May I request that the presentation be shown or flashed on the screen? Okay, so I'll be addressing labor issues during and post ECQ. Next slide, please. Now, all of us, of course, wanted our year 2020 to be a peaceful, healthy, and prosperous year. But because of COVID-19, our lives have changed. And due to this pandemic, governments, institutions, organizations, establishments, and even individuals have to make tough or hard decisions. And also because of this pandemic, we now have keywords or phrases such as social distancing, flatten the curve, frontliners, and work from home. Next slide, please. Now, what are the measures that can be implemented by the management? I have identified 4, And the first of this is the adoption of alternative or flexible work arrangements, which will be the bulk of my discussion this morning. The second one is the suspension of operations or temporary closure of establishment. The third is the reduction of personnel, which was already discussed by Mr. Gener earlier. And number four is the total closure of establishment. Now, I have not included here another option, and which the government has encouraged big businesses or large establishments to undertake. And that is if the business establishment can, or if its financial position supports it, then they are encouraged to shoulder the full salaries or wages of their employees during the ECQ. Next slide, please. Now, adoption of alternative or flexible arrangements, work arrangements, is nothing new. In fact, way back in 2009, the Department of Labor and Employment, or DOLE, had issued Department Advisory Number 2, series of 2009, already identifying certain alternative or flexible work arrangements. And during that time, DOLE identified 6. And in fact, 5 years earlier, or in 2004, DOLE already allowed the adoption of compressed work week, or CWW. And then in 2009, aside from compressed work week or CWW, it identified 5 additional flexible work arrangements. Next, please. Now, because of COVID-19, DOLE issued Labor Advisory Number 9, series of 2020. And this was, if you can see, this was issued on March 4, 2020, before entire Luzon was placed on ECQ. And this advisory simply reminded these business establishments that one of the measures that they can implement in order to address the effects of COVID-19 would be to adopt certain flexible work arrangements. Next, please. And Labor Advisory Number 11 was issued by the DOLE in order to clarify certain guidelines that it issued in relation to COVID-19. Now, for our discussion this morning, we will be referring to these 3 labor advisories of DOLE. Okay. Next, please. Now, what are flexible work arrangements, or FWAs? As mentioned in these labor advisories issued by DOLE, FWAs are remedial measures in time of economic difficulties and national emergencies. And right now, the national emergency that we are facing is the COVID-19 pandemic. And because of this COVID-19 pandemic, the DOLE has encouraged business establishments to adopt FWAs. Next, please. Now, the adoption of FWAs is considered as better alternative than outright termination of employment or closure of the establishment. As mentioned earlier by Mr. Gener, there should be a balancing, okay, of the business interest and, of course, the welfare of your employees. And if the financial position of the company or establishment supports the retention of all employees despite ECQ and even post-ECQ, then that is a better alternative. And in order to address certain concerns, the company might consider the adoption of FWAs instead of totally closing the business. Next. Now, FWAs may be adopted taking into account the adverse consequence of the situation on the performance and financial condition of the company. So as I have said earlier and as mentioned by Mr. Gener, the adoption of FWAs primarily will have to depend upon the financial position of the company. Next. So FWAs refer to alternative arrangements or schedules other than the traditional or standard work hours, work days, and work week. Of course, we all know that the traditional work setting is that you have employees going to the workplace every day, Monday to Friday or Monday to Saturday or even Sunday, depending on the work schedule, and then working for 8 hours a day. But because of this COVID-19, the need to adopt FWAs has become a necessity, so to speak, because of the challenges that we're facing due to COVID-19. So here, I will be discussing or presenting later some of these FWAs. Next, please. Now, bear in mind that the effectivity and implementation of FWAs shall be temporary in nature. Now, if you will ask, what do you mean by temporary? Although in the labor advisories issued by DOLE in March, there is no definition or explanation on how temporary is temporary. But if we were to look in the labor advisory that was issued in 2009, in one of the alternative work arrangements, there is a mention of how temporary a alternative work arrangement is, and there it says that it should not be more than 6 months. Okay. Next, please. Now, what are the examples of FWAs identified in the 3 labor advisories that I mentioned earlier? One is telecommuting or work from home. In fact, telecommuting has been the subject of a law which was passed in December 2018, and that is Republic Act number 11165. What do you mean by telecommuting or work from home? So it's a work arrangement in which the employees work outside from home, outside from the office, and usually from home, and they use telecommunication devices in order to render work. And the challenges have already been discussed by Mr. Gener earlier. And I just want to share a story about telecommuting involving a call center agent. A client calls the hotline, and the call center agent answered the call. And the client has been complaining about the charges incurred and included in the statement of account. And since they could not come to an agreement, the client insisted that he should be allowed to talk to the supervisor. So the call center agent said, okay, hold on for a second, and I'll raise your concern to my supervisor. And then the call center agent said, Ma, pakisagot mo nga to. Okay, so, and then if you will see in the picture that I have included in my presentation, although it's a comic presentation of a possible scenario of working from home, but it actually reflects the realities and challenges of working from home. Next, compressed work week. So this refers to a flexible work arrangement in which the normal 5-day work week or 6-day work week is reduced into, say, 3 or 4, and the work hours are also compressed. Okay, so instead of rendering work the usual 5 days or 6 days, okay, the work week will be compressed. Okay, next, reduction of work hours or work days, so similar to compressed work week. Now, this is the FWA or alternative work arrangement, which I mentioned earlier, that in the 2009 advisory of DOLE, in which DOLE mentioned that this particular type of FWA should not last for more than 6 months. Okay, next. Rotation of workers. So this involves, as the name implies, rotation of workers. So for example, if you have 10 workers, you will assign 5 workers, okay, to work on certain days, and then the other set of 5 workers to work or to render service on other work days. So that is the rotation of workers. Okay, next, forced leave. So this involves a situation where the employees are required to go on leave and use their leave credits if there are available leave credits. Okay. Next, please. Broken time schedule. So instead of rendering, for example, 8 hours in a day of, let's say, 4 hours and then 4 hours, okay, broken time schedule, okay, allows you, for example, to further break it down. Let's say you render service, let's say, for 2 hours straight, and then there will be break, and that break will give an opportunity for other employees to render work, and then that other employees, okay, would render service for, let's say, 2 hours straight, and then there will be another break, and then another, okay, set of employees would be rendering work. Okay, next. Flexi holidays schedule. So this involves the use of your available holidays. Okay, use that or avail of the use of that on some other days. So for example, May 1, okay, an employee may opt to work on May 1 despite it's a holiday, and instead make use of the leave, okay, for that particular day on another day. Okay, next please. Now, what are the requirements? So the requirements are this. No? If an establishment is intending to implement FWAs, so they have to post a copy of the labor advisory in a conspicuous location in the workplace. Now, what labor advisory? My advice is for the establishment to post all 3 labor advisories. So the labor advisory that was issued in 2009, and the 2 labor advisories issued by DOLE in March of 2020. Now, if you will ask, how can we physically, okay, post copies of this since we are on ECQ? Now, an alternative way of doing that is to post copies of the labor advisories and the fact that the company is implementing FWAs in the company website, or send via email to its employees copies of the labor advisories and the decision of the company that it is adopting or implementing FWAs. Now, the other requirement is that the employer should notify the DOLE regional, provincial, or field office, which has jurisdiction over the workplace of the adoption of FWAs. And the relevant labor advisories state that the notice shall be in the establishment report form attached to the labor advisories. There's a requirement there that prior to the implementation of the FWAs, the establishment should have already notified DOLE. Now the question is, what if we have already implemented FWAs and we have yet to notify DOLE? My advice is that you can still notify DOLE post implementation, or while you have already implemented, while you're already implementing FWAs, and then just justify to the DOLE regional office, provincial office, or field office why the company failed to notify DOLE prior to the implementation. And of course, the #1 reason that you should be able to cite there is the fact that we are on ECQ. Okay. Next, please. Now, in DOLE Labor Advisory number 11, it states there that leaves of absence during the community quarantine period shall be charged against the worker's existing leave credits, if any. And then remaining unpaid leaves during said period may be covered and be subject to the conditions provided in the DOLE's COVID-19 Adjustment Measures Program, or CAMP. I'll be discussing later CAMP, but for this particular slide, I just want to emphasize that as one of the FWAs, the forced leave, so if there are available leave credits, okay, the establishment can make use of that and apply the available leave credits of the employees. Now, if there are remaining unpaid leaves, then either they may be able to apply for CAMP, or okay, the other scenario would be the no work, no pay rule. Next, please. Now, the Bayanihan to Heal as One Act was promulgated on March 24. And there is one particular provision there which is relevant to our discussion today, and that is found in Section 4 and letter T. And it simply states that the President is authorized to continue to authorize alternative working arrangements for employees and workers in the private sector. Now, this simply embodies into law what the DOLE has issued in March, okay, the two labor advisories that issued in March of this year. Okay, next please. Now, I'll be discussing two legal principles or rules that are applicable these days. The first one is the no work, no pay rule. And in one decision of the Supreme Court, it says that the basic rule in this jurisdiction is no work, no pay. Okay. Next slide, please. Now, this no work, no pay rule was actually taken from a statement before, which states that a fair day's wage for a fair day's labor. And as early as 1953, in one case decided by the Supreme Court, the court already stated that if there is no work performed by the employee, then there can be no wage or pay. Now, you have to bear in mind that this rule applies to both monthly paid and daily paid employees. So therefore, both monthly paid and daily paid employees are only paid for days worked, and thus they are not paid on unworked days or unworked hours. Next, please. The other rule is the rule on non-diminution of benefits. Here in this slide, I have presented here the two legal bases, okay, for this particular rule. One is Article 100 of the Labor Code, which is the prohibition against elimination or diminution of benefits. However, in a number of cases decided by the Supreme Court clarified that actually Article 100 of the Labor Code only applies to those benefits already being enjoyed by the employees at the time of promulgation of the Labor Code, which was in the 1970s. So the Supreme Court clarified that aside from Article 100, the other legal basis would be Article 1308 of the Civil Code, which is the provision of our law dealing with the principle of mutuality of contracts. This simply means that okay, the provisions of a contract, okay, its implementation okay, should not be left to the will of one of the contracting parties. So applying that to an employment contract, if there are certain benefits already conferred to the employee by virtue of that contract, okay, or by virtue of a company policy, or by virtue of a CBA. Now, those benefits can no longer be withdrawn okay, by the employer without the consent of the employee. Next, please. And this was embodied in one case decided by the Supreme Court in 2013, in which the Supreme Court said that generally, employees have a vested right over existing benefits voluntarily granted to them by their employer. Thus, any benefit and supplement being enjoyed by the employees cannot be reduced, diminished, discontinued, or eliminated by the employer. Now, this two sentences best embody the definition or the principle of non-diminution of benefits. Okay. Why do I present the no work, no pay rule and the rule on non-diminution of benefits? The no work, no pay rule will become relevant if the establishment decides to adopt FWAs or decides to have a temporary closure of business. So if there is no work performed by the employee during ECQ, then the employer is justified in not paying. Okay. What about non-diminution of benefits? So for example, if an FWA involves reduction of work hours or work days, so instead of, for example, receiving 1,000 pesos every week because of the reduced work days or reduced work hours, okay, and the work days or work hours would only justify, let's say, paying 500 pesos. So if the company pays that, then the company is justified. So the work is commensurate, sorry, the pay is commensurate to the work performed by the employee. Next, please. So the first part of my discussion or talk deals with the measures that can be undertaken by the management. Now, this part will now, I will now present to you the government financial assistance. And all of us have learned that by virtue of Department Order number 209, the government through DOLE issued guidelines on the CAMP. Okay, and what is CAMP? CAMP is the COVID-19 Adjustment Measures Program. And it's a safety net program that offers financial support to affected workers in private establishments that have adopted FWAs or temporary closure during the COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, next, please. Now, in this slide, you will see that in determining who are entitled to CAMP, that involves a two-step process. The first step is DOLE will have to determine first whether a certain establishment is qualified to avail of CAMP. And in order for that establishment to be qualified for CAMP or to apply for CAMP, it's either it implemented FWAs or it decided to have a temporary closure of its operations. So not all business establishments are entitled to apply to this. Only those establishments that have either adopted FWAs or decided to go on temporary cessation of operations are the ones that will be entitled to apply for CAMP. Now, the second step is once DOLE has identified that indeed a certain establishment is entitled to apply or qualified to apply for CAMP, the next would be within that qualified establishment, now among its workers or employees who are qualified to apply for CAMP. So not all its employees are qualified. Rather, only those workers who are under FWAs or those employees who have been told by the company not to report for or not to render work during the ECQ. Okay, now the term used by DOLE in the department order is suspended workers, but actually DOLE is referring to those employees affected by the temporary suspension of operations. Okay. Next, please. Now, CAMP is actually a one-time financial assistance equivalent to 5,000 pesos only. Okay, and the documentary requirements are: one, the submission of the establishment report form, and two, submission of the company payroll for the month prior to the implementation of FWAs or temporary closure. Next, please. DOLE Labor Advisory number 12, okay, is the labor advisory issued by DOLE in order to clarify its definition of affected workers, because in the department order, it did not include the phrase regardless of status. And when we say regardless of status, it means to say that the employee is either permanent or probationary or contractual. So regardless of the status of the employee, so whether he is permanent or probationary or contractual, as long as that employee is either on FW or an employee who has been told by the establishment to stop rendering services due to the temporary suspension of operations. And here, the other clarification made by DOLE in this labor advisory is that it attached to this labor advisory a revised establishment report form, and it also clarified that, okay, the company payroll that may be submitted, okay, by the business establishment is the February 2020 payroll or its payroll earlier. Okay. Next, please. In Labor Advisory number 12-A, DOLE clarified that if there is no available payroll, then among these 8, any of these 8 other documents may be submitted by the establishment in order to support its application, okay, for CAMP. Next, please. I found this inspirational message, okay, which states that still having an income during this crisis is a huge blessing. As I have mentioned before, establishments, okay, may choose any of the 4 measures that I have presented in one of the slides. And I also mentioned that I did not include there, okay, one other measure, and that is if, okay, the establishment can, or if its financial position, okay, supports it, then as encouraged by the government, the business establishment should shoulder the full salaries and wages of its employees. By the way, just an update on the status, no, of CAMP, based on the news release of DOLE published in its website. As of April 19, 2020, DOLE announced that it has stopped accepting requests or applications for CAMP. Why? Because as of now, it only has a budget of 1.6 billion pesos for this program. And out of 1.6, they have already extended an amount totaling to around 1.3 billion pesos. So leaving a balance of around 300 million pesos. And according to their news release, they have already processed and extended to around 264,000 employees who applied for CAMP. And that ends my presentation, and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Robel. We'll now proceed to our question and answer portion. We have several questions, actually. Robel, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, good. We have several related questions on FWA.
Yes.
And essentially, they're asking, because you did mention that employers can actually force their employees to take paid leaves from their annual leave credits and implement extended leaves without pay. I guess the question is, under the no work, no pay law, and does it contradict the non-diminution of benefits? And does it matter if you're unionized or non-unionized?
Okay.
Let's start with that one.
Okay, so first, in one of the media briefings of Secretary Bello, he clarified that you cannot compel employees to make use of their available leave credits because it might run afoul the non-diminution of benefits rule because a leave credit, whether it's a sick leave or a vacation leave, is a benefit granted to an employee. Now, depending, of course, on the rules promulgated by the company on the use or availment of these leave credits, okay, if the availment rule is silent, okay, then you cannot force the employee to, cannot rather compel the employee to go on forced leave. Now, if that is the case, then the no work, no pay rule will apply. Because if, as I have said, if there is no work rendered, then there is no pay due to the employee. You mentioned, what if there is a CBA? Okay. Again, it does. My position is this, and this is my personal position. It does not detract from the rule of no work, no pay. If there is no work rendered, then there is no pay due to the employee.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Does this another question related to that one is once the ECQ is lifted and the working conditions require that regular employees, particularly this for monthlies, and they may be needed to work in shifts because of the social distancing. This and the no work, no pay or partial payment, will that apply as well? And I guess we just need to apply with the DOLE for that type of arrangement. Does that work?
Yeah, yes, that is correct, actually. And as noted by Mr. Gener earlier, it might become the new normal, actually. And if that will become the new normal, I personally expect DOLE to issue relevant guidelines later on. Now, even if there is no guideline that will be issued by DOLE later on, my position is that with the existing labor advisory that was issued way back in 2009, so even post-ECQ, establishments can adopt certain FWAs.
Okay, good. Thank you. For Mr. Gener, we have a question here regarding work from home arrangements. So what are the systems or policies that an organization should have for work from home arrangements? Some companies were not able to supply computers, for instance, or laptops that allow them to communicate with the office. But we understand that there are projects that can be completed and submitted during this period as well, or after the period. Mr. Gener, how does that work in some companies? Can you give us examples?
Are you referring to people who do not have access to laptops and internet connections?
That's correct. Can they work on projects, for instance, at home, assignments, for instance, which they can submit and to justify their work from home arrangements?
Yes. Work from home arrangements, even without laptops or internet connection, can still be done. Because in our survey, what we found out is even when your employees are detached from you and you implement working from home, the first thing is it entails a lot of trust and confidence on the part of the employers to trust and be confident with his employees. That's the first one. The second one is employees must be worthy of that trust and it should not be violated, meaning employees must do their work professionally. Now, if you do not have any telecommuting means, I suggest that you can do your work, but find ways and means to submit it to your supervisor or managers as a proof that you have been working from home. Remember, I mentioned early on that this is the time that we should not be conscious about the working hours. We should take a look at the output because working hours cannot really be measured by work from home or telecommuting. So you take a look at outputs. That's my response.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We have a question from Tomas Gomez. Can you share your presentation materials, gentlemen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. That answers that question. I'm afraid that's all the time that we have. What we will do, we will circulate the questions to the panelists, and then we will request them for the answers. At this point, I'd like to call on the chairman of the chairperson for the FINEX Academy, Ms. Marivic Espano. Marivic?
Hi, Ned. Thank you very much, and thank you to our very good and very effective speakers. I think the discussion this morning, I was really keenly listening to them, really emphasizes the need for us to understand the changes that will happen to the way we work uh, with our employees and with our clients. And that process of understanding and planning what would happen when the PCQ is lifted must happen now. And critical to this, based on what Rene and Robel mentioned, the planning, asking the right question, understanding our employees and what motivates them, understanding the behavior that we want to see them exhibit during and after the quarantine. So I encourage everyone on behalf of FINEX Academy to continue the discussion, reach out. I saw so many questions here. I wish all of us can just go into a virtual coffee room. And probably that's the next, the next step for us, so that we can learn from each other, just answer those questions and share the experiences that we have. I think that is most useful. So I hope Robel and Rene would make themselves available again should we decide to have a part of this. I saw the number of participants. I think the highest we had was about 140. The questions keep on coming. We have 37 there. That only means that people and labor issues are really top of mind during this time. So thank you, everyone. And as mentioned by Ned, we will try to respond to the questions and send them to you. And I know Jeng is still on the line. Maybe we can set up a virtual coffee time to discuss this. So good day and thank you again.
Thank you very much, Marivic. We'd like to thank our speakers again, Rene and Rohel, for joining us this morning. Again, Marivic had a good idea about the kapihan. Maybe you'll have an e-kapihan to answer some of the questions. We'll probably schedule something like that as well. But we'll make sure that we'll forward your questions and we'll try to answer them directly or online. Then we'll also post the presentation materials. That ends our program for this morning. Thank you all for joining us. Good day.
Thank you.